Hello and welcome to the October 7th edition of the Cluster API provider AWS Office Hours, a subproject of Old State Cluster Lifecycle and Cluster API. Just a reminder that the Kubernetes Code of Conduct is in play for this meeting, and it is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube later. If you are attending, please go ahead and add yourself to the attending list on the meeting notes. And if there's anything that you would like to discuss, please go ahead and add it to the agenda. I've went ahead and linked the notes in the chat for anybody who's here as well. To start off with, we had a few PSAs. First one, version 0.4.1 was released. Please go ahead and check the release notes. There are quite a few features and bug fixes that landed with that release. And we also had version 0.3.9 release as well. It was released to help support the transition to the upstream image builder and the removal of the CloudInit fork. And it is quite possibly the last v.0.3.x release, barring any unforeseen events. The other one is that the upstream image builder is now no longer using the fork of CloudInit with the custom kubeadm modules. So everything should be using upstream CloudInit now. All right. Any questions, comments, or concerns there? All right. Next up is action items from the last meeting. Andrew, there were a couple related to the CoreOS support that we discussed a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, so we are still taking a look at this. Basically, we're talking with some of our other teams who like instrument our CoreOS provisioning process to see like if it would be acceptable for in the interim term to kind of just do what we're doing now, but in CoreOS land, which would just be basically an image per version, and then see if we could go from there. Have not put a ton of time into figuring out like how to make like the Bootstrap provider understand kind of the way that we want to do it yet.
All right, great. Is this something that you want me to go ahead and keep on the agenda list ongoing for an action item, or?
I would say like let's just I will capture it in an issue and just kind of keep information flowing that way. I just don't know how much each week I'll have on it. Though I'm happy to talk.
Yep, sounds good. I just wanted to make sure that we wouldn't drop the issue on you, and but at the same time, I didn't want to continually bug you.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Yeah, you know, I'm happy to keep it on.
All right, great. Any other topics that anybody has before we move into the backlog? No? All right, then. Over to you, Andy.
Thanks, Jason. If you would stop sharing, I will take over. I spotted a bug. Okay, so we have 4 open issues without a milestone. The goal here, if you're new, is to just do a quick review and then try and set the priority and the milestone. And we're basically deciding if we're going to work on this for treat something as a bug fix for the current release, work on it for the next upcoming milestone, or we also have a next milestone, which basically means that we've triaged it, but it doesn't have a particular release that we're planning on getting it out in. So this was one that I opened about, should we wait on AWS operations to complete when we're reconciling, or should we just issue an operation against AWS and then come back in the next resync and see how things are going? And I don't think we've made any decisions here. So I think just putting this in the next milestone would be appropriate as we continue to debate it, and we can continue to have discussions as time permits. And from a priority standpoint, I definitely think it's either backlog or long-term. Anybody have any strong feelings? All right, I'm going to put it in the backlog then. Okay, next up is option to launch instances without an SSH key pair. It does have awaiting more evidence. I think Vince says we should be able to do this without specifying the key name. So I think we can probably just put this in the next milestone and wait for Andrew to come back with a comment. Please speak up if you disagree or have something to say. All right, can't create two public subnets. Liz, I saw you open this one.
Yeah, I was trying to test the ALB provider, and it requires you to have two public subnets so that it can load balance between them. And I noticed in the code that only one elastic IP address is ever created, and it's create or update based on a single name, which means we can't have two public subnets.
Okay. The ALB work is coming from, who's asking for that, or where did that come from?
It came from a different bug report.
Okay.
And I assume that this person who filed the other bug report, once they got the fix that I had for that initial bug report, they would encounter this issue. But also, just like, you know, if we want to say this sort of thing is out of scope, we should enforce that explicitly. We should just, you know, have a validation error. I honestly don't totally understand the implications of the numbers of subnets, so somebody else might need to make that call. But the situation where you can do it and it just fails for unknown reasons is probably not what we want permanently.
Right. Anybody else have strong opinions on this plus ALBs?
Yeah, so normally you would, in a production environment, have multiple public subnets. So I think it will be important to production users.
Okay. Do we need to fix this soon or later? I'm guessing later. Andrew, you all don't currently have needs for multiple public subnets, do you?
Well, so we do, but this is about creating them as part of like creating a cluster, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't use Cluster API to create our networking.
Okay.
So we don't have a need there.
All right. I'm going to propose next on this one. And I don't know, is there, between backlog and long term, what do you all think?
I think long term, maybe. I don't think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree there.
Okay. Works for me. Thank you. And then last one, seg faults with setting a NAT gateway ID on a subnet. Probably need to fix some aspect related to this. whether we just fix the subnet, or I don't know if we need to change the API, given that there was some back and forth about a read-only spec field versus it shouldn't be.
I don't think there's any particular reason we would not want somebody to be able to use a existing NAT gateway.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like I was super involved in the design decisions here. So
Okay. Well, nobody else has reported it, which doesn't necessarily mean that nobody's run into it, but it's not anything that's causing a significant amount of headaches, I'm guessing. So I think from a priority standpoint, I would say soon, given that it is a seg fault. And we can put it into 04x, and if we get around to fixing it, great. If it slips to 05 or whatever we do for V1 Alpha 3, I think that's fine too.
I think if that's the case, we should probably make it important long term. If we don't care if it makes it into the release, then to me that's important long term.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking, since we haven't had a lot of people report this, like it's a seg fault, so it's nice to fix. So I don't know, maybe let's leave it soon and put it on 04x, and hopefully someone will get around to fixing it.
I mean, I probably will. I have the context for it, and I've mostly just been going through Kappa and picking up all the issues flagged important soon. So
Okay,
I'll get to it.
cool. Well, then we'll do important soon. Thanks, Liz. All right, so that is the end of open issues without a milestone. We do have 11 open PRs that, since we have plenty of time left in the hour, I figured we could just touch base on what we've got open. So first one from the bottom is refactoring the EDE test. Jason, how are we doing?
Go ahead and close that one now.
Okay.
The work that was started there has now landed in master, so I don't see a reason to backport it to 0.3.
Okay, thank you. One down. Now we have support Amazon VPC CNI Kates. This was against the 0.3 milestone because it was open technically before we released Alpha 2. Nadir, I see you were in here a little bit. I think there were also some other comments as well. Anybody have the history on this one, or a strong feeling for what we should do here? Let's see.
I mean, the approach looked fine. Rather than, I haven't looked in the specific detail. My main ask was to rebase it onto master, and then we can decide to backport if we really want to.
Yeah, we don't want to backport. Did you ask him? Okay,
Yeah, I added a comment, like, I think up there somewhere.
All right, so I think you're in here somewhere, Vince.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we could decide that we want to hold this for alpha, just have it go into master and have it be part of the next release instead of being for 04x.
Oh, I just noticed it's, the contributors opened another PR for 04x, work in progress.
Okay. This one?
Yeah.
All right, then I think we can close the one that's targeting release 03, or at least suggest it. API version. So you have, what number was that? 1158. Okay, so that's that one. Next up is validating webhooks, which where did we end up on this one? I think this one just needs another review because I haven't looked at it in a little while. So I'll come back and take a look at this, and anybody else who's interested, please do so as well. So what this one does is it takes the validation logic that we have in master right now and in 04 and that was in 03 that looks at the Kappa resources after they've been created or updated and they've been stored in etcd, and then it will go and validate them and potentially set error message or error reason, I believe. So this switches it to use a validating webhook so that we get real-time validation. Okay, I know there was some activity on this one over the weekend or today, wanting to be able to do internal and not internet-facing control plane load balancers. I think this one probably, I know Nadir, you had some comments in here as well as Vince. Do y'all think this one is close to ready to go? Should it go in for 04, or should it wait until the next release?
I think it's okay to go in.
Yeah.
Yeah, this looks like a reasonable addition to me. Okay, so we'll finalize review on that this week. And then we have the CNI. I just want to check on the status on this one. Okay, nobody's reviewed this yet. So anybody want to sign up to review this? Have time and interest?
I will do that.
All right. Thanks, Nadir. All right, increase the default concurrency. I know we had a lot of comments on this one. So we could not do anything. We could have, we could just double it to 2, or I think with some more data around API request limits, we could potentially go higher. So do y'all want to consider just going from 1 to 2 on this for now, or leaving it alone until we get some data?
So I know in our case, the data is quite tainted because of the fact that we also use the VPC CNI with respect to the API limits. That being said, you know, we still pump up the volume on the concurrency. I think definitely moving to higher than 1, like even 2, would probably save a lot of hurt, in my view.
Yeah, all the users I've spoken to now have bumped it.
Okay, and I see Jason wrote he's good with 2. So Vince, why don't you just bump this to 2 and we'll get it merged?
Sounds good.
Thanks. Okay, we have a PR from Liz. Delete cloud provider, provision load balancers, and security groups. Oh, I see I'm listed as a reviewer, so I should probably do that. All right, yeah, I will take a look at this as soon as I can, Liz. This was around service, load balancer services, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, thanks. Apply ELB related tags to managed subnets. This is also related to the ALBs.
Yeah, there's a couple of flags that AWS expects on subnets, and
Okay.
this just updates them so they get included.
And Vince, you've reviewed this one, right?
Yeah, I made those test changes this morning, Vince. So
Cool. Alrighty, add webhook port flag. So this, we want to be able to run the Kappa pod as non-root, and there were some defaults that expected the webhook server to listen on port 443, which requires a root user. So this changes the default port to 8443 and also exposes it as a command line flag so that you can configure it. I know, Jason, you were waiting on this change, which looks like it's in now, so you should be pretty close on this one. Although I did have a question. So the ports in the container portion of the pod spec, I know tends to be informative and not prescriptive. And I'm also wondering, like, if a user were to change this, then presumably they should change what's in the patch as well. I'm wondering if this is even really needed, or if we could just remove this entirely. Does anybody know?
Yeah, that's correct. I think it would be correct to remove that part of the PR.
Because I know, like, when you're doing a Docker run and you tell it, or like in the Docker file, you say that it exposes a certain port, that tends to be informational. And from a Kubernetes perspective, I think it's even more informational in that, like, I don't think this does anything. I'd have to go look at the code in Kubernetes on the kubelet side, but.
So the one thing I was more concerned about, and I don't think it's generated today because we're not generating the webhook yet, any webhooks yet, but the service name or the service that's exposed, we'd want to make sure eventually that that's configured for the right port.
Yeah, so I fiddled around with both validating and defaulting webhooks with Kube Builder and controller runtime, and it took care of everything for me, including creating the service. So I think
Yeah, I assume that once you have the scaffolding in place for the webhook, it will generate the manifest for us. We just have to make sure that that generated manifest is using 8443 for the target.
So we probably may need some documentation somewhere around, if you're not using 8443, here's what you need to do.
I believe server backend ports can be referenced by name as well. So like from the perspective of the service in what's on the screen, it would just be webhook server, and it may or may not need to know what number it is, what number port.
I think it does.
So that's probably the benefit to leaving it there so that we don't have to specify it in the service then.
Yeah, I mean, I think it needs to get specified somewhere so that the Kubernetes service knows to map to a particular port in the container, whether it's in the service or here, right? All right, well, I think this can go in, and as we get around to pulling in the validating webhook.
Should we hold this though until like the webhooks are merged?
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't provide any value until the webhooks come in.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, so we'll just.
Well, so I would say it does provide value in that you can run the container as non-root. Because is it trying to listen to that port now, even though we haven't defined any webhooks?
No, we're running as non-root now.
Okay. All right, I just wanted to double check that.
Yeah, this becomes a problem. So in the validating webhook PR, at one point there was a change to the Docker file to run as root. And I'm pretty sure that got undone. Yeah, so here, with the validating webhooks enabled, then, running as non-root, it can't bind. And so we ended up getting 1120 file to make the port configurable, which led to the PR we were just discussing. So yeah, we're fine in either order. Although if this validating webhooks PR goes in and we don't have the configurable port with the default to 8443, then we can't run. So yeah, I mean, this can go in now. All right. Liz, you've got a new one to actually apply explicitly specified subnet tags.
Right now you can specify subnet tags and then we happily ignore them.
All right, we should fix that.
It's a pretty simple change. So.
Okay, yeah, we'll get around to reviewing that today. Thanks. And then we have Noah's leader election fix. So we were trying to run Cluster API, Kappa, and the Q8AM provider all in the same namespace. And they all try to use the same default leader election ID. And so only the first one that gets it and acquires the lock is allowed to run, and the other two just waited. So we have corresponding PRs for Cappy and the Q8AM bootstrap provider, and we'll probably do them for CapZ and CapG as well. And we should probably do CapV too. So. All right, that is all we have in terms of open PRs and issues. Back to you, Jason.
All right, does anybody have any other topics they'd like to bring up today?
I do. Hi, guys. So I'm working with stuff around subnets. We're in an organization where our accounts are created for us by a separate department in our organization, and the subnets are we're not able to name them or tag them. They're just given to us. So we have a set of like 4 private subnets, which we'll be sharing for all our Kubernetes accounts. And there's like lots and lots and lots of accounts like that. So we need to figure out a way to be able to specify in our AWS cluster specs. We need to be able to specify specific subnet IDs that we want to use. I'm trying to figure out how to make that gel with the assumptions that are currently made by Kappa. Because when I provide an AWS cluster spec with the subnets our subnet IDs listed in the network spec, and then the reconciliation happens, like my set of subnets just kind of gets lost and everything gets populated, and then when you create the control plane load balancer, there isn't really a mechanism there where I can specify which subnets to use. It's a tricky one. I don't want to.
Are you, if memory serves, we reconcile based on the name of the subnet and the CIDR? Are you saying that it's not noticing that they already exist and just like creating them again? Because that's definitely a bug.
It could be. I'm not aware of what if I provide X, then Y should happen. I'm not sure what I can provide for it to grab just the subnets I want. It looks as though it's expecting that they would be named. They would be named a particular thing, and part of the expected name is the name of the cluster that it's provisioning, but we can't have specific subnets per clusters here. So
you can bring your own VPC ID and subnet ID. Are you saying that like you can't? It's the ELB that's not picking up the right subnet that you want?
ELB, the ELB is the first thing that I run into that causes a crash. So far, yes, and I'm not sure about the other things yet.
So, the way that we make clusters right now is we have an existing AWS account with an existing VPC with existing subnets, and we put those subnet IDs into the subnet field on the cluster object, and then we also put the subnet ID in the subnet field of all the machine deployments that we create.
Okay.
That presently works and also creates a load balancer, though load balancer in a private subnet is not yet a thing, I believe, if that's something that you may require.
Yeah, I forget this. I forget what's up with that. I think that's an issue that's been raised, and I think
You have a PR for that.
I may have a PR for it. Yeah. But so that aside for a second. So just so I'm clear, so the AWS cluster spec is where I would define the subnet for the control plane load balancer, and the machines are where I can specify the subnets for the machines.
The load balancer doesn't. I don't think it allows you to specify which subnet to pick as of today.
So maybe that's the only thing I'm running into, and maybe I just haven't, because I haven't got to the machine part yet. Maybe that'll work, but I'm not sure. So I'm assuming that I can just apply subnet IDs, and it will just reconcile those for me and nothing else.
Yeah, one thing that the load balancer will, as of today, I think you have a PR merge for something else, but as of today, will try to attach to all the public subnets. And by all, I mean like at least one, or like one per AZ. And yeah, so that like it can serve like multiple availability zones. I don't know how it changes for when you do private. But yeah, it doesn't let you pick which one to use. It will just attach to all of them.
Right, and we also wouldn't want, because we have some subnets that we should use that are marked like enterprise, and we have other ones that are marked. They're intended for specific things, and we're not supposed to. We'll be out of compliance if we use those other subnets. They're all private. So by the current implementation, if I was to just take out the filter public thing, it would likely choose subnets that we don't want it to use. So we need to kind of be able to be a little bit more explicit. So I'm curious what you guys think about that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Devils, and the trick is to design it right.
Yeah, and it's I realize it's orthogonal to the direction that the design has been taking.
Yeah, yes and no. I think, yeah, we just haven't figured out all of the topologies that we would likely need to support and what's the best way to do that. There's obviously a trade-off in terms of user experience versus level of customization. Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky.
I don't think there's anything particularly. I can't think of anything that wouldn't work if there was just a field on when you set the. I guess we don't have a specific object for the load balancer, do we?
Yeah, which actually brings a thought that I had while I was reviewing your other PR for the load balancer scheme. Instead of like kind of have this like very generic load balancer scheme on the network spec, to have a struct that's very specific to the API server load balancer, which says which scheme, and then later on you could add also the subnets in there. So there's like a struct like Liz was mentioning that kind of is very specific to that load balancer.
Okay. I'd be more than happy to spike a kind of an implementation of that. So that would be a struct that hangs off the top level AWS cluster type struct.
Yeah, I'll leave a comment so that yeah, we can discuss there.
All right, great, cool. Thanks.
All right. Any other topics for today? All right. In that case, I hope you all have a great day, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.